Welcome to Dr. J Explains. I'm Dr. J, physician and finance enthusiast, breaking down complex healthcare and money topics into practical, powerful insights for everyday use. Let's dive in. Are you ready to be instructed?
I am.
All right, welcome back to Dr. J Explains. Today, we're going to talk about some financial basics, kind of knowing what numbers are important to you as we kind of delve into more financial topics in healthcare, but these are specific to everybody. So, I'm Dr. J, this is Drew, and we're ready to get going. Okay, so what are the important things about building wealth? You've heard me talk before about wealth is not income, but income is a wonderful tool to use in building wealth. So what are the things that we need to know to build wealth? What helps us? The first one is time, and as we've talked about before, time is your biggest asset. Time is your biggest friend. We will get in here a little later. We'll look at compounding, and you see how the curve starts to take off, which nothing short of time is going to help that particular issue. But if you've gone into some sort of professional field, you've gone to graduate school, you're a dentist, you're an optometrist, you're a physician and gone to medical school, you're a lawyer, time is already not on your side because you were starting later than other people. Habits that you learn early will really stick with you over a long period of time. Because number one is time, then it's kind of like the discipline. And the more automated you can make things, the better. Small changes can make big outcomes over a period of time. A 5% higher savings rate, as it says here, can actually get retirement a little sooner than you wanted to do it. And that's really the reason you want to build wealth. At some point, you want to build financial independence, which means you're no longer dependent upon an income. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to build your net worth. And you'd be surprised at how many people don't look at this. A lot of people know what net worth is, but very few people actually look at their net worth number to determine what's there. So what is net worth? Net worth is if you take your assets, things that you own, and that would be like your savings account, your cash in your checking account. If you own a house, your retirement accounts, and then anything that is truly money that is truly owed to you. Now, your cousin that borrowed $50 20 years ago, I don't know if I'd count that in my assets because that's already proven to be a bad asset. Minus your liabilities, and liabilities would be like credit cards, personal loans. Next, you would have school debt, which a lot of people we may be talking to right now have a lot of that school debt. So that can be a significant issue. If you borrowed money to buy a car or if you have a mortgage, all those things are considered liability. So you take your assets, you subtract your liabilities, and you have your net worth. Starting very early on, a negative net worth may not be an unusual thing to have, but it's important that you track it to be sure that it is trending in the right direction. Later on in other podcasts, we're going to talk about liquid net worth versus just net worth. Now, there are 5 pillars that you should know about. Number one, the thing that we all know that very few of us do is what is your budget? You need to know how much you're spending, and it needs to be a thoughtful process that you have, not something that just we spend and at the end of the month we total it up and this is what it was. Next thing is an emergency fund. Things will happen in life. You're going to have to fix something on a car. You're going to have to do a repair. If you own a house, you're going to have to do a repair. And I promise you, those things always come at the wrong time. So you need 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses in an emergency fund. So that's why it's also important to figure out what you're spending. Your next is your debt payoff. If you've got high interest debt, and I would tell you that I don't think there's any problem in using credit cards, but credit card debt that you carry is always a no-no. It is an outrageous amounts of money. So if you have any credit card debt, you need to pay that off immediately. It's important to invest. When you get out and get your first job, it's important that as soon as you can, you enter their retirement plan and you're putting at least enough away to get any kind of match dollars that they may have. Protect. We've talked about this a little bit, but this is where insurance is going to come in. That number one, we talked about the importance of life insurance. Because especially if you have a family and you're starting off early, you have school debt and other things, it's important to look at your insurance needs to be covered, and the importance of disability insurance. Because the worst thing that can happen to you is you lose the ability to work. There are some things you look at, different kind of budget patterns. This is not one that you absolutely have to go with, but number one, 50% of what you would spend would be on necessities, rent, utilities, groceries, I would say basic transportation, not necessarily that that's a need to have a Ferrari to get around. It'd be nice, but not necessarily necessary. And your absolute minimum payments. That should take half. And these figures up here are your take home pay. You're going to have to pay taxes and that kind of stuff before you ever get to this. 30% dining, travel, subscriptions, hobbies, guilt-free by design. You need a percentage of money that you spend every month where you can enjoy the money that you are making. And it said 20%, that's where you build up your emergency funds, your retirement, your investing, and your extra debt payments. I would say people that have a lot of debt from going to school, you might want to change that to 50, 25, 25. But those are kind of some of the basics to start with. Now, you can tweak things up or down after that, but that's a good place to start. The next one is building a buffer before you do anything. And that would be like the $1,000 emergency fund. Now, remember, you want to get to a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months, but you need to have something in a reserve to begin with to help. It talked about 3 months of expenses. That really kind of gets into the fully funded emergency plan, but 3 months, 6 months. If you're in a medical profession as a physician or a dentist or optometrist, your job is pretty stable. So 3 months might be okay as opposed to 6 months. but you do want to get there. And then it's got the 6 months, right, target for variable income. If you work on commissions only, or even perhaps as a physician, you work on, you eat what you kill model, what you bring in, because you can have slow times and it can slow down. So those are the basics to know about, to get covered before anything else. Now, remember, not all debt is equal. First of all, I said, some people talk about high interest debt, and that would be credit cards, payday loans, personal loans. You really don't want those things, and you want to get those things paid off quickest. Even though they may not be the highest, you will get them paid off the quickest. What if I told you I knew a way that you could get a 20% return on your investments? Y'all all say, sign me up. Sounds good. Well, the first way you can get 20% on your investments is start a credit card company, because that's what you're paying to somebody else. So you want to be sure that what you're paying out is as efficient and low cost as it can be.
How to start a credit card company.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. As soon as this video's over with, we're going to go start a credit card company. Number 2, pay steadily. Student loans, car loans, in a reasonable range, which they say is 4 to 8%. And that really probably depends on whatever kind of interest rate environment you're in. I still remember, when I bought my first house. Now, I understand that I'm old as dirt, but we were so excited because we got our interest rate down to 10%. Now, right now, mortgage rates running at about 6.5%, and everybody thinks that's awful, coming off a period of time where some people got interest rates between 2.5% and 3.5%. So that does sound high. I'm old enough to go, I wish, I could, go back to 2.5% to 3% interest rates, that, because they were better than 10, but also you got more money for your money in the bank than your 0.01% interest, now. And then they say you don't have to be in a hurry. Interest rates you have less than 4%. If you have some sort of federally subsidized loan and your interest is less than 4%, you have a mortgage rate less than 4%, you don't have to be in a big hurry to pay that debt off, because you might argue that you could make more money investing than you could paying those off. Now, understand, I don't like debt, and I think there needs to be a goal in your life where you plan on being debt free. I know for me that came at 51 years old. Even though I did have a mortgage that was pretty low, I paid it off anyway because I just didn't like the fact of that debt hanging over my head, and I didn't want to owe anybody any money. All right, look here, what compounding actually looks like. And this slide I think is very important, because you see at the top, this is somebody who starts saving at 25. And look, as that line goes out, it starts to bend upwards. And this years at the bottom are how old you are. But notice the gap between that and the light green line at the bottom that says you started at 35. And that was saving $500 a month at a 7% interest rate. So a lot of people that are professionals, they don't have the option of starting at 25. So you almost have to look at that 35-year line, and you've got to do one of two things. You're either going to have to go 10 years longer, which is going to put you at 75, or you're going to have to save more than $500 a month. So now some of y'all may absolutely love what you do, and you may say, well, I can work till I'm 75. What if you're physically not capable of working till you're 75? So that's what happens when you start late. If you sit here, starting at 25, you're going to end up with 1.37 million. At 35, it's closer to 620,000. So understand at 35, if you want to have that same, 1.37 million, you've got to save $1,000 a month, not $500 a month. The extra $60,000 that, you contributed in that decade is worth $750,000 by the time you get to retirement. So those years are important. So either you can drag these years out further this way, or you can put more money away. Investing is how you buy your freedom. Remember, we talked about financial independence, and I think everybody would love to get to the point that their work and their income was completely discretionary. You can work on your terms. You can work for what you want. You don't owe the man. You don't have to go out and have that income come in. So understand this is 2 to 3% typical savings yield. No. I mean, it's about 0.01% if you have a regular savings account. Now you may get into a CD or a high yield savings account and it might be between 3 and 4%. 7% is the long-term real market return. Now, a lot of things confuse people. Notice it says real aftermarket return is 7%, and that's assuming you reinvest your dividends. Now, people will say, well, hadn't the S&P 500 returned an average of about 10% over the last 20 to 30 years? Yeah, but that's before inflation. Notice this says this is after inflation. If you can get a 7% return after inflation, you are doing very well, and that's about what the market returns on average. But remember, some years you may be 10 or 12% ahead of inflation, and some years you may be 10% below it, but it's going to average out to be about 7%. That's why you don't want to put money in the stock market that you know you're going to need in 2 years, because you can't afford to be one of the time where the market has dropped 10%. Now, the other thing out there, they see 25x. How do you know you're financially independent? Now, remember, we said we were going to get into liquid net worth later. But just to say, you need to have enough liquid investments, and that does not include your house and assets, that you have 25% of your annual expenditure. Say you spend $10,000 a year, you need 2.5 million. Once you hit that number, you should be able to support your income without any additional income coming in. Now, if it does come in, I don't think anybody's going to complain. Also talks about up here, if you increase your savings rate, we already kind of talked about that on compounding. If you increase your savings rate, you can bring that time forward for financial independence. 6 factors that decide the outcome. First one is time in the market. That is much different than timing the market. And most people say it wins every time. The amount of time you spend in the market is going to win over timing the market. There was a study that looked at, I think they took January 25th, 2005, all the way to January 31st, 2024, 20 years. And I don't know, some of you young people won't remember, but what started happening in 2008, 2009 was the financial crisis. And then we had a dead, almost like 10 years where the market just didn't move very much. It didn't go up, didn't necessarily continue to go down, but it didn't go up. And then it started to increase, and then we had COVID, it went down again. But if you had money on that day and you had $10,000 and you just left it in the market on December 31st, 2024, that $10,000 would have turned into $60,000, 6 times what it was. If during that period of time you decided, I'm going to pull my money out, and because I think the market's bad, if you only missed the 10 best days during that 20 years, which very often followed the worst days during that period of time where you want to be out, you would have only had $30,000. So missing those 10 days cost you half of your return. If you miss the worst 20 days, so that's 1 day a year, 20 days in 20 years, you would have the same amount of money you started off with on January 1st, 2025. So sometimes the worst thing you can do is think you know when to get out and you know when you can get in. Your savings rate. There's no doubt somebody who saves 50% of everything they make is going to get there a whole lot quicker than you are. But as a professional who's starting a professional career, your savings rate has to be higher because you already have less time to be in the market. Consistency. If you automate things like I'm, going to put this percentage of my income away into my 401k, I'm going to put so much money away every paycheck into a brokerage account or savings account. The more you automate it, the more you put discipline behind it, the more that it's going to work. Diversification. I heard somebody the other day, I was watching a special on financial stuff, and somebody was saying, are they diversified? And they had like this money, say 1.5 million in a retirement account, and they had it in an all stock fund. They had some international fund or emerging markets in bonds, and they were a little bit worried. Should they be more bonds or less bonds? But they also had in a brokerage account $1.7 million of one company stock. And I'm going, you're worried about this retirement plan over here and what your bond percentage is and want to know if you are diversified and you're not worried about this $1.7 million you have sitting over here in one stock. A lot of people have loved Elon Musk. They've loved Tesla. They love SpaceX. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being invested in those companies, but if half of what I had was invested in them, I think I would be concerned. The other thing you need to think about is cost and taxes. Number one, the biggest expense you will ever have your entire life is taxes, what you pay out in taxes. The other things that people may not consider is what are they going to spend in cost and fees? A 1% fee on your investment. We already talked about, 7% after tax returns pretty good. If you're giving a percentage of that away and now it dropped to 6, well, you just gave 1/7 of your earnings away to somebody else. Now, am I saying that that's never worth it? No, but you dang sure better well be sure what they do is worth 1%. Are they saving you money on taxes? Somebody who just tries to tell you they're going to charge 1% and they're going to tell you what to invest in. Well, you can put your money in a low cost index S&P 500 fund and probably do pretty well and not pay all that money. Now, if they're giving you tax advice, they're bringing you things that you didn't think of, well, then that fee may be worth it. But I think back in the good old days, I'm old enough, were pretty much the only way to get into the market was you bought stocks and you had to go through an advisor to buy stocks to be in the market. Risk tolerance. Whew. You know, what is your risk? Nobody likes to lose money, but the question is, how much are you going to lose over time? You know, I've got relatives that have all their money in cash and they were too nervous to put it in anything else. Now, if they've got their expenses covered, they've won the game to last them the rest of their life, I would say, why take risk? Now, I would say, was it probably the wisest move during that period of time? No, but they've already won the game. Now, where do you put money? Under your mattress, in a mason jar, in holes in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me where you live. And I'm showing up with a shovel in the middle of the night.
Night vision.
Yeah. We're going to do a night thing. 401k. Remember, if they match you 50 cents on the dollar, that's an immediate 50% return. I mean, that's better than the credit card. If they match dollar for dollar, that's 100% return.
Mm-hmm.
So you're foolish not to do those things to begin with. Roth IRA. For those of y'all that don't understand the difference between a Roth, and you can have a Roth 401k.
Mm-hmm.
I think you told me you put money into a Roth 401k at work.
Yeah.
And what that means is you got to pay taxes on the money that you put in the retirement plan then, but it's got 30 years that it can grow. And then when you take it out, it doesn't cost you a penny in taxes. If it's in a regular 401k or a regular IRA, kind of take the Roth and put it in front of 401k or IRA, you got to pay taxes on it. So say you put that $10,000 in it in 2005,
Mm-hmm.
you waited 20 years, it became 60,000. Well, if you didn't pay taxes on that $10,000, they're going to charge you income tax not on the $10,000, but on the $60,000.
Mm-hmm.
If you put it in a Roth, you paid income tax on $10,000, but you get to take out $60,000 tax free. Now, I would say give strong consideration to doing Roth. There may be some exceptions if you're in a very high tax bracket where it may be better to put in pre-tax money if you plan on being on a lower tax bracket when you get to retirement. So I would do that. HSA, health savings account. If you have a high deductible health plan, you can put money in there. It's tax-free when you put it in there. It grows tax-free. It comes out tax-free if it's for paying medical expenses. So that is like the only triple win that I know of in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Brokerage account. You know, you can put money in a brokerage account. Some people refer to that as an after-tax account. Anything in there grows tax-free. But when you get paid dividends or interest or you sell something, it counts as income. You're going to pay capital gains taxes.
Now, so the dividends and everything, do you pay it when they give it to you or when you pull it out? Like if you reinvest it back into the brokerage account,
You're going to have to pay it when the dividend was generated by the company.
Okay.
So sometimes some people may not like doing that because it's like, well, I didn't take the dividend. Well, as it grows early on, the dividends probably aren't going to be as much, they're going to add, $1,000, $2,000 a year to your income. You're going to pay taxes on, but you need to reinvest it. The capital gains, like if we were going to buy Microsoft stock,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And right now, Microsoft stock's about $500 a share. So say you were going to buy 100 shares. That's $50,000. Now, they pay about a 3% dividend. So a year. So that's that's, I think, if my math right, that's like $1,500 a year that you can invest back into the company. So then instead of having 100 shares, you'd have 103 shares. When they pay that dividend, you have to pay taxes on that in the calendar year in which that dividend was paid and you reinvested it.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you sell your stock and say now it's grown to $100,000, you don't have to pay taxes on that $50,000 until you actually sell it. Now, understand if you sell it for $100,000, you're not paying capital gains on 100,000, you're paying capital gains on 50. So that's kind of the good, the bad of a brokerage account. If you have a lot of cash in there, just like if you got it in a high yield savings account, your interest income is going to have to count as income in the years generated, even if you didn't take it out.
But because of that, you want to put money in your 401k, your IRA, and your HSA before you put it in a brokerage.
Early on, I would say yes. At some point, I think a brokerage becomes very important. There's probably going to be times on down the road, even if you have a house now, you may want to buy another house later and say that it's 10 years down the road. Well, you would want to put that money in a brokerage account and probably invest it and grow it. I would say anything less than 5 years, it ought to be pretty liquid. If you know you're going to use it in 5 years. So there can be reasons to start brokerage accounts sooner, but I would say the first thing you want to make sure you're doing is completely funding a Roth IRA and completely getting the match on your 401k. Then there can be arguments about where's the best place to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Protect what you're building. This gets into insurance. So number one, health insurance. I can promise you things happen at the most inopportune times. And if I've always said insurance was you paying somebody to take a risk that you cannot afford to take on your own.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that Elon Musk needs the traditional kind of insurances we think about. He can probably cover any health problem he has. He's probably got that much money in his front pocket, but health insurance is needed. And now when you're early on, you're healthy, high deductible insurance plan, build money in a health savings account, that may not be a bad thing. Disability coverage, we already talked about. The worst thing that can happen to you is you being unable to work and generate an income. So you need disability insurance. We've talked before. You can stack group on top of individual, but you cannot stack individual on top of group. I would use the period of time between I finished school and I started my first job. I would go get all the individual disability insurance I could. I'd try to make it on occupation, and then I would get what I got at work. Rent or autos insurance. I think that's pretty clear, especially if you have any financing on a car. They're going to make you have probably full insurance. And most people say you're supposed to have at least liability insurance anyway. But things happen and, they're not planned, but they happen. Term life. You need a lot of insurance when you're young, like Drew, when you're young. And if you're married and have kids, if something happens to you, that number is huge. When you get to my age, if you follow the financial plan and you save money, life insurance is not that important to me. I mean, my family doesn't need it to survive. My kids are grown. We have enough money saved up that, I don't really need life insurance. I have some, but I don't really need it. Your credit, credit scores are important, even though we don't like debt. I'd say don't worry about your credit card. Don't ever borrow, your credit score, excuse me. you don't ever want to borrow money, but that's not realistic in today's time. If you're going to have to buy a house, sometimes when you apply for jobs, they actually look at your credit score.
Mm-hmm.
So people look at your credit score. So you need to have good credit habits. You need to pay that credit card off. Any loans you have, you need to pay them on time. And you don't need to borrow too much money where they look at you at a risk because there's no way you can put the money back. You do not want to be the federal government. I promise you, if you go in with $40 trillion of debt, the bank's not going to loan you any more money. So, fraud basics, I think identity fraud. I'd be interested to see what Andrew has to say about fraud, especially in the time of AI.
I mean, it's definitely a concern. I mean, there's, freezing your credit's good if you don't think you're going to use it. There's stories of people who, just don't check it for a while because they don't need it. And all of a sudden they go to run their credit and what they thought was an 850 turns out to be a 540. And that's a real uncomfortable conversation for everybody.
Well, I don't know if any of y'all have ever watched the show American Greed, but I am amazed at how many people just aren't very wise or use their stuff to, protect themselves and how they are victims of fraud, especially older people.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here are your first 90 days. Here's your plan. Number one, for the first month, track every expense. The second month, build your $1,000 starter fund. Sell things, sell your bicycles, sell your family pets, make your kids afraid you're about to sell them to raise that $1,000 to get started. The third month, automate transfers on payday. Open a Roth IRA, pick one broad index fund. S&P 500 is good. Set a quarterly check-in. So remember this: boring, automatic, and consistent. This is what you need to be. And we thank you. And we will see y'all again soon with another topic on Dr. J Explains.